Leyla pressed her forehead against the cracked window of her bedroom in Ankara, listening to the endless hum of traffic below. The narrow streets of her neighborhood had always felt like a maze she could never escape. At 24, her dreams of studying abroad and building a career felt like dust slipping through her hands. The weight of her family's expectations, marry soon, keep quiet, obey, wrapped around her like invisible chains. Each day blurred into the next, suffocating in its sameness, until the evening she stumbled into the message request folder of her social media account. The profile picture showed a grey-haired man in a pressed suit, smiling against a backdrop of the sea. His name, Richard Harris. His first message was simple: "You look thoughtful. What are you thinking about?" She almost ignored it, but loneliness has a way of softening resolve. She replied cautiously at first, then more eagerly as days turned into weeks. Richard told her stories about America, retirement on the coast, long drives under open skies, dinners in restaurants where music floated softly between tables. His words painted a freedom Leyla had only glimpsed in movies. He called her darling girl and my future. He was decades older. Yes, but he seemed to listen in a way no one else ever had. One night, as the call timer blinked past 2 hours, Richard's voice dropped lower. "Leyla, you deserve so much more than the life you're living. Let me give you that. Come to America. Be my wife." Her breath caught, the silence stretching as she looked around her dimly lit room, posters curling at the edges, stacks of books she could no longer afford to study. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know your heart," Richard replied, "and I know mine. Don't waste years waiting. Say yes, and I'll take care of everything." His certainty shook her. The thought of leaving Ankara, of stepping into a world without boundaries, was irresistible. Her mother's warnings rang faintly. Men who promise too much, men who see desperation as weakness, but Leyla drowned them in hope. The following week, a bouquet arrived at her door, imported roses wrapped in silver paper. The card read, "To my future wife, love, Richard." Her hands trembled as she held it, the petals soft against her skin, fragile yet intoxicating. When Richard video called again, she tried to joke. "Flowers travel faster than I do." "They're only the beginning," he smiled. "Next will be the ticket, then the ring." Her lips curved into a hesitant smile, though unease curled quietly in her stomach. His intensity felt overwhelming, but the promise of escape outweighed hesitation. Within weeks, paperwork began. Richard guided her through forms she barely understood, assuring her it was routine. He sent photos of the Florida house he wanted her to call home. White walls, wide windows, and a backyard with palms swaying in the breeze. She pictured herself there, sunlight on her face, no one telling her who to be. One late evening, as she sat with her laptop glowing in the dark, Richard leaned closer to the camera. "Marry me, Leyla. We don't need to wait. Say yes, and everything changes." Her voice shook. "Yes." The words slipped out like a confession. Richard's smile spread wide, his eyes bright with triumph. She should have felt joy, but instead her chest tightened. The silence in her room seemed heavier than before. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing her mother's voice warning her not to mistake escape for love. But she silenced the thought by clutching her phone, rereading Richard's messages, until dawn. By morning the decision was final. She was no longer just Leyla of Ankara. She was about to be Mrs. Harris of America. The promise shimmered like sunlight on water, beautiful, blinding, and impossible to touch. Yet beneath that glow, a shadow followed her, whispering that freedom might come at a price she hadn't yet imagined. And as the plane ticket arrived in her inbox, glowing against the dark screen, Leyla whispered to herself, "It's real now." She didn't notice the chill that ran down her spine. Because beyond oceans, in the quiet of a Florida home, Richard Harris was already rehearsing how life with his young bride would look and how it would bend to his rules. The Florida air clung heavy against Leyla's skin as she stepped off the plane, clutching her passport with trembling hands. She had imagined arrival as a burst of joy, bright skies, freedom, the beginning of her new life. Instead, fatigue pressed against her bones, and the airport lights felt harsh, exposing her vulnerability in a foreign land. Richard waited at the gate, silver hair slicked neatly back, smile wide enough to draw curious glances. He embraced her tightly, too tightly, whispering, "My wife." Finally, she forced a smile, though his grip left her ribs aching. On the drive to his house, the highway stretched endless and strange. Billboards shouted promises of luxury cruises, miracle diets, and glossy lawyers. Leyla pressed her forehead to the window, watching palm trees blur past. Richard filled the silence with talk of their future. "You'll love it here," he said, hand-tapping the steering wheel. "No more worries. No more Ankara. You belong with me now." She nodded, whispering, "It feels unreal." "It's real because I made it real," he said quickly, voice sharp beneath the charm. The house appeared like something from a postcard, white siding, sprawling lawn, windows glinting under the sun. Inside, everything gleamed, polished wood floors, neatly lined shelves, the faint scent of lemon polish. Yet it didn't feel welcoming. The rooms echoed with silence, as though no laughter had lived there in years. Richard set a suitcase down in the master bedroom, where the bed was already turned down. "This is home," he said almost possessively. "No more sharing with anyone. Just us." Leyla whispered, "It's beautiful," though her eyes lingered on the single lock on the door, solid and heavy. Days blurred into an odd rhythm. Richard insisted on cooking breakfast himself, eggs and toast at 7 sharp. He showed her the neighborhood only once, driving slowly, warning her which streets were unsafe. He discouraged her from walking alone. Her calls to her family grew shorter. Richard often hovered nearby, reminding her of the time difference, urging her to rest instead. At night, Leyla lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, hypnotic circles. The silence outside felt oppressive compared to Ankara's constant hum. She missed the crowded streets, the sound of neighbors laughing, even the arguments that spilled through thin walls. Here, quiet carried the weight of isolation. One evening, when she reached for her phone after dinner, Richard's voice cut through the room. "No need to call home every night. They'll pull you back there. You're mine now. I just want them to know I'm safe," she murmured. His eyes narrowed. "You're safer with me than you ever were there." The finality in his tone silenced her. She turned her gaze toward the window, where the last traces of sunset bled into night. The sky looked vast, but the house felt smaller by the hour. The dream she had clung to on the flight was fading, replaced by a quiet unease. The house was beautiful, yes, but beauty can hide a prison, and though Leyla tried to ignore it, she could already sense the walls tightening around her. The weeks passed with a heavy stillness. Leyla tried to fold herself into the routines Richard built around her. Breakfast at 7, gardening in the afternoon, quiet evenings in front of the television where he chose every channel. Yet the edges of her patience began to fray. Freedom had not come. Instead, her days belonged to him. Richard's gaze followed her constantly. When she scrolled her phone, his hand would slide across the screen, casually asking, "Who are you texting?" If she hesitated, his smile hardened, and silence filled the room like a punishment. One morning, she asked gently, "Could I look for a job? Something small, maybe at the cafe we passed." Richard's jaw tightened. "There's no need. I provide. People might take advantage of you here. Better to stay home where you're safe." His tone left no room for argument. The cage grew invisible bars, yet loneliness gnawed at her. On one rare afternoon, when Richard dozed in his armchair, Leyla slipped out and walked the few blocks to the cafe she had once glimpsed. The bell above the door chimed softly, releasing the warm smell of coffee and cinnamon. Behind the counter stood Sarah, a young woman with kind eyes and tired hands. "You new around here?" Sarah asked, sliding a cup toward her. "Yes," Leyla admitted, voice low. "I moved recently." "Thought so. You've got that look, like you're lost, but trying not to show it." The words made Leyla's throat tighten. For the first time since leaving Ankara, she felt seen. They talked briefly about weather, about how quiet the neighborhood was. When Sarah scribbled her number on a napkin, "In case you need a friend," Leyla folded it carefully, hiding it deep in her pocket. Back home, Richard's questions came sharp. "Where were you?" "I just needed air," she said softly. His eyes lingered on her longer than necessary, suspicion curdling in the space between them. The next day, she found him rifling through her purse, holding the folded napkin. "Who is Sarah?" His voice cracked with a dangerous edge. "She's just someone I met at the cafe. She was kind." Richard's face darkened. "You don't need friends. You have me. I know what's best." He crumpled the napkin and tossed it into the trash. The sound echoed louder than it should have, leaving Leyla trembling. That night, while he watched television, she quietly retrieved the napkin, smoothing its wrinkles with shaking hands. She hid it in the lining of her suitcase, determined to keep at least one secret of her own. The following days grew tense. Richard's watchfulness sharpened, his questions became interrogations. Even the smallest actions, answering a message too slowly, stepping into the yard without telling him, were met with cold silence or biting words. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Leyla finally whispered, "You're treating me like a prisoner." Richard didn't look away from the screen. "Prisoners don't live in houses like this. You should be grateful." The word grateful cut deeper than anger. She turned toward the dark window, her reflection blurred by raindrops. Outside lay a world she was forbidden to touch. Inside sat a man who believed possession was love. And somewhere in her pocket, the faint outline of a napkin pressed against her hand, reminding her that the first crack had already formed, and cracks, no matter how small, only ever grow. Leyla learned to move like a shadow through the house. Richard's moods shifted quickly. Some mornings he was affectionate, calling her my treasure and promising trips they never took. But by evening his eyes narrowed with suspicion. She began to sense his fear of something larger than jealousy, though he never spoke of it. One afternoon, while cleaning the study, she found the drawer of his desk slightly ajar. Papers lay inside in messy stacks, not the neat order Richard usually demanded. Her hands trembled as she pulled out an envelope marked with official stamps. The words hit like cold water. Notice of investigation, Immigration Services. Letters detailed questions about their marriage, warnings of fraudulent intent, requests for interviews. Leyla's chest tightened. If the marriage was exposed as a sham, she could lose everything. Her visa, her chance at freedom, her future. Richard's footsteps sounded down the hall. She shoved the envelope back, heart racing, and pretended to dust the shelves. He entered, gaze sweeping over her. "What are you doing in here?" "Just cleaning," she whispered. His eyes narrowed, then softened suddenly. "Stay out of my desk. There are things you wouldn't understand." That night at dinner, Richard spoke as if nothing had happened. He cut into his steak, smiling too widely. "You must know, Leyla, that people envy what we have. They'll try to destroy it. But as long as you stay loyal to me, we'll be untouchable." Her fork clattered against the plate. "What if they find out?" He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Then you'd be sent back, and your life there is over. Do you want that?" The words struck like shackles. She thought of Ankara, the narrow streets, her mother's disapproving eyes, the endless repetition of days. She shook her head, unable to speak. "That's what I thought," Richard said, satisfied. From then on, Leyla felt the papers burning behind the desk drawer, a secret weight in every room. Her dreams of freedom blurred into panic. Richard reminded her constantly of her dependence. "You have no money here, no family, no protection but me," he would say, each phrase tightening the knot around her. Sometimes, though, his voice softened. "I saved you from that little apartment in Ankara. I gave you a future. Doesn't that mean something?" Leyla forced a smile, though bitterness rose like bile. She began sneaking small moments alone, locking herself in the bathroom under the pretense of long showers, scribbling notes to herself in Turkish. She knew he wouldn't understand. She wrote down the address of the immigration office from the letter, hiding the scrap of paper inside a book. The act itself felt dangerous, a rebellion in ink. On one rainy afternoon, as Richard napped, she returned to the desk. This time she read deeper. Bank statements, receipts for wire transfers, even an unsigned letter addressed to an attorney. Phrases leapt out: risk of prosecution, evidence of fraud, possible annulment. The word annulment froze her. If the marriage was erased, she would lose her status, her chance at independence. Worse, she would be trapped in a foreign country, with no way out. Richard stirred awake before she could put everything back. His voice called down the hall. "Leyla, where are you?" She shoved the papers into the drawer, heart pounding, and rushed to the kitchen. He eyed her closely when she appeared. "You were in there again." "I wasn't," she lied quickly. His lips curved into a knowing smile. "Careful, darling. Lies between us will destroy everything." The way he said destroy chilled her more than shouting ever could. That night, she lay awake listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing beside her. The papers were locked away, but the truth of them pressed down on her chest. She now understood she was not Richard's wife in the way she had imagined. She was leverage, a shield against investigations, a pawn in a game she hadn't known existed. And as she stared at the ceiling, clutching her pillow, one thought burned through the fear. She had to find someone she could trust. Someone who could help her escape before the cage closed completely. Leyla's world shrank until the walls of Richard's house pressed against her lungs. The documents haunted her, whispers of a truth she dared not voice. She began to crave the sound of another human being, someone who did not look at her as possession or proof. One afternoon, she told Richard she was walking to the market. He frowned, but didn't argue. His attention had been buried in phone calls and unopened letters. Heart pounding, she slipped out and made her way to the cafe. Sarah greeted her with the warmth. Leyla had nearly forgotten. "Hey, stranger. Thought you disappeared." I can't come often," Leyla admitted, voice low. "It's complicated." Sarah studied her carefully, then pulled up a chair. "You don't have to explain. Sit. Talk." The hours passed gently. For the first time since leaving Ankara, Leyla laughed. Sarah listened without judgment, her kindness opening a door that had nearly closed forever. When Sarah leaned closer, her voice dropped. "You don't look safe. Do you need help?" Leyla hesitated, words trembling on her lips. "I don't know who I can trust." Sarah pulled a card from her purse, pressing it into Leyla's palm. "Then trust him. His name's David. He's a lawyer, Turkish-American. He helps people like you." The card felt heavy, the ink pressing hope into her skin. That evening, Richard's eyes flickered over her face as she returned home. "You're late," he said flatly. "I lost track of time," she whispered. His hand brushed her cheek, gentle yet suffocating. "Be careful, people might fill your head with nonsense." Later that night, while Richard showered, Leyla dialed the number on the card. A steady voice answered in Turkish, carrying the cadence of home. "This is David." Her throat tightened. "I don't know where to begin." "Start anywhere," he said softly. "You're safe talking to me." She told him pieces, never the whole truth. Papers in a drawer, a husband who controlled every move, a marriage that felt less like love and more like chains. David listened without interrupting. "You're not alone," he assured her. "There are options, but you have to be careful." After she ended the call, relief mingled with terror. She had crossed a line Richard would never forgive if he discovered it. The next day, Richard's suspicion deepened. He lingered near her phone, eyes narrowing when messages buzzed. "Who were you speaking to last night?" "No one," she lied, forcing calm. His jaw clenched. "Don't betray me, Leyla. Betrayal is unforgivable." She turned away quickly, hiding the tremor in her hands. The card with David's number was tucked deep in the lining of her purse, safer than the papers in his desk, but infinitely more dangerous if found. Outside, the world carried on, bright and indifferent. Inside, the house grew colder, the silence thicker. Leyla's secret lifeline had been planted, and though it gave her hope, it also painted a target on her back. The storm rolled in just after dusk, thunder rattling the windows while rain lashed against the glass. Leyla sat at the kitchen table, her phone tucked secretly beneath her hand. David's last message still glowed on the screen. "We need to meet soon. Bring the documents if you can." Her pulse raced. If Richard discovered her contact with David, the fragile thread of safety she'd built would snap. She slipped the phone into her pocket as Richard entered, his shirt damp from the storm, his expression unreadable. "You've been quiet lately," he said, pouring whiskey into a glass. "Almost like you're hiding something." I'm just tired, she whispered. He studied her, eyes narrowing. Tired of me? Lightning flashed across the room, carving his face into harsh angles. Leyla looked away, the weight of the secret pressing on her chest. Later, when he stepped out to fetch another drink, she left her phone on the table, screen down. But Richard's sharp eyes caught the faint glow when a new message appeared. He picked it up before she could move. David? His voice cracked the air. Who the hell is David? Her throat tightened. He's just a lawyer, someone to talk to. You went behind my back. His voice rose, trembling with rage. After everything I've done for you? The storm outside mirrored the storm inside. He slammed the phone onto the table, glass shattering under his grip. You think you can use me for papers and then run? His words were venom. You think I'm blind? Leyla backed against the wall, heart hammering. I only wanted help. You can't control me forever. Control? He stepped closer, towering over her. I gave you a life. Without me, you're nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. Rain battered harder against the windows, thunder roaring. His hands shook, veins straining under his skin, as though his fury could no longer be contained. Richard, please, she begged, tears burning her eyes. I just want to live. You live because of me, he spat. He lunged, fingers closing around her throat with terrifying force. The world blurred as Leyla clawed at his hands, her breath ripped away. She tried to scream, but only a strangled sound escaped. The smell of whiskey and sweat filled her lungs instead of air. The lamp toppled, crashing to the floor. Shadows twisted across the room as her vision dimmed. Richard's face loomed above hers, red with rage, his eyes wild. You betrayed me, he growled. And betrayal has a price. Her body convulsed once, twice, then fell limp. Silence followed, broken only by the rain hammering the roof. Richard staggered back, staring at her lifeless form sprawled across the floor. For a moment, the storm outside seemed to hush, as though the world itself recoiled. He ran a trembling hand through his hair, whispering to the empty room. She forced me. She left me no choice. But the body at his feet told a different story. A story that would not stay buried. At dawn, Sarah's knock went unanswered until Richard appeared, shaken. Inside, she glimpsed chaos, suspicion tightening her chest. Minutes later, police arrived. Leyla's body lay lifeless on the floor. Richard muttered of betrayal, of immigration fraud, of losing everything. His words sealed his fate. In court, Sarah's testimony and David's evidence exposed the control, the rage, the fraud. The jury needed little time. Guilty. Leyla's mother wept in Ankara. Sarah carried her grief in silence. The Florida house stood empty, a shell of false promises. Freedom had drawn Leyla across oceans, only to be stolen by the man who promised it.